Welcome to the New Joshua On Podcast. My name is Isaac Kamens. This is a bi-weekly podcast where my friend Jess O'Brien and I discuss internal martial arts, Qigong, and meditation. In this episode, we're going to look at a 2005 interview that Ed Hines did with his teacher, Luo De Xiu, that was published in a British martial art magazine, Martial Arts Illustrated. In the article, Luo talks a lot about Bagua as a martial art, so we get into some of the training versus actual application of Bagua Zhang, and Luo kind of breaks down the way in which he teaches Bagua Zhang. So we talked a lot about this stuff in the Patreon in recent episodes as well, so you may want to go check that out. Okay, I hope you enjoy the episode. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves and be well.
So continuing our discussion of the Yizong Bagua system from Taiwan, we're going to do another article and sort of speculate on some of the stuff as taught by Luo De Xiu, one of the proponents of the Yizong system, and one who's probably traveled and taught in the West the most. We just looked at his article in Taiwan Wulin from 2001, and now we're going to look at his article in English Martial Arts Magazine, Martial Arts Illustrated, July 2005 episode. And this one is Britain's #1 martial arts magazine. So it's sort of an introduction to Luo De Xiu, but I think he covers some interesting stuff that highlights what he teaches in his Bagua. So here it says, Luo De Xiu is an old-style shifu who is both well-known and respected by the people who are in the know. This highly rated Taiwanese master is indeed a revelation and inspiration. Luo is a master of Bagua Zhang, the most esoteric and misunderstood of the Chinese internal martial arts. Bagua Zhang is famous for producing some of the most feared fighters from China. The following interview was conducted by Shifu Edward Hines. Ed Hines lived in Taiwan for a number of years and studied intensively with Luo. So this is entitled Luo De Xiu. In the 1970s, Luo competed in and won many full contact tournaments in Taiwan. As he progressed in the system of his teacher Hong Yixiang, he became more and more interested in Bagua specifically. He spent many years researching the system and with his teacher's classmates, with other teachers, through books, and in any other way he could. The depth of his research and skill comes across in the authority with which he speaks, and more importantly, moves. Luo is immensely fluid and powerful. So here's the interview. Why is circle walking important in Bagua? Luo De Xiu says, because straight line needs too much space. He laughs. The circle walking in Bagua is a method that trains different things at different levels. First, it trains movement. In a fight, you need to keep moving. It also trains strong legs, balance, and concentration. The footwork is very important. It does 3 things. It helps you find balance within non-balance, helps your body, mind, and power and structure to all become one, and it helps strengthen your legs. Circle walking of Bagua is taken from an older Taoist method, and so it can be used for meditation and Qigong too. There's a lot there in that little statement, but
Sure is.
you know,
That's the only time I think I've ever heard him talk about how it can be used for meditation.
it's not something he talks about, but I do believe it's something he definitely believes and trains.
Yeah.
So I like what he says here that the footwork has 3 things. It helps you find the balance within non-balance, so you get balanced while you're moving around off balance.
That's the hardest part, I think.
Right? I mean, that's huge. Like if you just do like this morning I was out there and it had been raining a bunch, so like in the mud, first thing I slip a little bit and it sort of strains my Achilles. I'm like, shit, like no matter there's no amount of circle walking that's too much in terms of improving your balance. You put yourself off balance on purpose by walking, and then you rebalance yourself. Like that's simple, but yet it's kind of genius. It really is neurologically good for your brain to constantly be rebalancing itself like that. And no matter how young or old you are, there's always something to learn just from the most basic circle walking exercise, right? Like you can always get better balance.
Right? Walking in general is one of the best things that you can do for yourself. And then circle walking adds this element of, like you said, just increases the level that you have to balance and sort of refines it and to a point where it's really like how often are you going to walk down the street with your body turned 90 degrees to the side, not
Right.
It's not something you're going to normally do. But the idea is that when that fluidity hits, and the idea that turning your body is comfortable. That's where
Right.
what all this circle stuff kind of gives you.
Right. And I
You
think
won't.
any martial art forms will do that, right? You do a Shaolin form jumping around and then a Tai Chi form shifting back and forth a whole bunch. But there's nothing quite as hard as I think the circling forces you to work harder than any other type of stepping. It just each
Well,
time you're going off balance with literally every single step.
most of the time you're stepping then turning or turning then stepping. You're not stepping and turning, right? So
Right.
it's that constant rotating as you step that, torques
Right.
things in a way that if you're walking straight and turning your body with your legs or with your hips, that's different. It still will activate a lot of that stuff, but there's something about when you kind of twist the whole thing on its axis, everything kind of goes, and
And you take that momentum, especially with a little of that mudsliding. Like, I've been doing this however many decades, and the first thing that happened out on the mud is I tweaked my Achilles, like just taking a step, right? I mean, being in my
yeah.
50s, maybe it's not a surprise, but also it's like you never get good at staying on balance. It's
Well,
not a
I
skill
mean,
that you ever like get and keep. You've got to constantly be trying it out and testing it.
well, and it's one of those things where I think key ideas, that you don't have to look for chances to lose your balance. It's going to happen anyway, right? Like,
Right.
so, there's ways you can make it harder on yourself, like
Right. And that's
turning
what
more.
Bagua is all
Right,
about.
like turning more or having a smaller circle, or
Yeah.
there's ways you can make it easier on yourself where you have a bigger circle and you turn less, and you develop the ability to do it in a way that's, gradual. And then when you do it, it's like not such a shocker. But I think when you just
Sure.
jump into the deep end and try to yank yourself, 45 degrees to the side when you're walking, it's a um yeah, it's a whole thing. Like
There's easy. It's just yeah. It's like
it's
I
just
think in
not
some
something
it
we do.
Tai Chi makes it harder for you in different ways. Tai Chi you have to go slow, which is hard on your mind, and it's hard on a different type of balancing. Honestly, to shift
Right.
from 100 to 100 in a slow, even manner is a challenge that's different from launching yourself forward in Bagua at a moderate pace, going around a circle. It's two different ways to stress out your system,
Well,
basically.
I mean, yeah, Bagua uses the same weight shifts, but again,
Uh-huh. A lot faster.
you're gonna be doing it like way quicker. Yeah. So I mean, the way one way to look at it is like what Tai Chi does by slowing down and going slower and relaxing more. Bagua does by speeding up, going faster,
Right.
and tightening your circle. They
Yeah.
both bring you into this level of having to have a little bit of extra awareness of how your mind and your body are working together.
Yeah.
It's kind of like
And that wouldn't happen if you didn't test yourself, stress yourself, do something that gets you out of your comfort zone. That's what Asian martial arts are always doing. They're pushing you to do something that's not easy. It's hard. You're not looking for the easiest way to do
you
something.
always start
You're
with the
looking for the
most
hardest way.
you start with the most difficult thing
Right.
and work your way back to the easy to doing it light and comfortable, right?
Right. But there's always a way of making it harder on yourself, no matter how good you get at a Tai Chi form or Bagua. You're always kind of starting over again each time in a sense of like keeping your balance under these circumstances. And I think that comes to the second thing he mentions. Make your body, mind, power, and structure all become one. And that's what, like we said in a bunch of the previous ones, Lowe's, one of his favorite quotes back in the day was like, become the one.
Right.
And so you've got that stepping again. If every time you step, you're off balance. So you've got to reconnect with the one. And then if you do that millions of times, then someone shoves you off balance. You take a step and you rebalance yourself the exact way you've been doing it on the circle this whole time. And like, that's brilliant.
Yeah, and it's about the idea of just that when you move as one piece, right? So rather than like leaning back and throwing your legs forward, that you're stepping
Totally.
with your basically keeping your head over your feet. And that creates this kind of integration
Oneness.
as you walk.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're just keeping that, yeah, that integration as you move.
And I mean, another martial arts might look at it and see how bizarre it is to see someone circling over and over. But what you're doing is rebalancing yourself every single step. You're reunifying yourself, throwing yourself off balance, reunifying, deunify, reunify over and over. And it looks hella boring. And sometimes it kind of is, but I just got to admit that kind of training's massive when it comes to being shoved and kicked and knocked out of the way. It just becomes it's so useful for chaotic movement that's that's out of control kind of. This enables you to go from out of control to control because you've done it so many times. It becomes
Well,
rote.
you create the chaos so that you can control the chaos, right? Like um, it's like every step you're falling and correcting yourself, right? So you're getting
Mm-hmm.
used to the idea of not being in control and then controlling it,
Then boom,
not being
all
in
the way in.
control. And it's the same thing like with Rosha, right? Like
Mm.
that exercise where you let them circle and then you circle and then and you have to give up and let the other guy do his circle and not try to take an advantage or keep doing something. It's that, this is the yin and yang part of Bagua, right? It's not
Yeah.
where like in Tai Chi, one level, you could think of it as like turn one way on one leg, one way on the other leg. Bagua, it's step from one foot to the other foot. So you still have a switch from one side to the other, but you're moving your feet in space rather than just shifting your weight. So that picking up your foot and stepping creates this um, forward momentum, right? That's why you're not, uh, it's not a stop, do something, move,
Right.
stop, do something, move. It's you're continuously moving and
Become the
doing stuff
one.
as you move. And
Absolutely.
it's like
A
the way I
never-ending
describe it is
process.
it's riding a unicycle, right?
Mm.
So it's like Tai Chi is juggling while you shift your weight back and forth, right? Which is
Mm.
hard, right? And turning your hips, right? Bagua is juggling while you're on a unicycle. That you have to make your 2 feet into one thing that can continuously move you without losing that center of gravity, rather than
That's
having
pretty
like,
good. Yeah,
you know,
a unicycle is kind of a good description because
it's the best
you
one I
never get to
got. I mean,
stop. It doesn't stop. Then you fall over. So
right. It's the
you have to keep.
momentum that keeps it
Yeah.
going or you eat it, right? And that Bagua is the same way. I mean,
So it's like is Xingyi you're attached to a runaway train while you're juggling and you're racing
yeah,
downhill. So the third condition he says it helps strengthen your legs. So like and I think he also means
absolutely.
stretch, bend, twist, lengthen, like all that stuff.
I
It
mean,
works the
yeah.
shit out of your
I
legs.
don't think there's a better like if you just want to get strong legs. If you just want to get strong legs, I don't think there's a better way to do it without maybe adding without doing a bunch of weight training or
I
something.
mean,
But
that would give
even
you a certain type of strength, but think
it
about all those
doesn't
twists and bends and
right.
squats. I mean, it's
It's the
what,
flexibility and the strength
yeah,
part, I
or
think. Yeah.
Tiangon, like you've been practicing lately, like
Oh, yeah, those things are gnarly.
you're under your yeah, it's a different type of leg training. And I'd say in Bagua, my experience was when I first started doing it, it was confusing, and then when I got better at it, I was able to hurt myself every different way. And then the third stage was to fix myself every different way. So like screw up my toe, screw up my foot, screw up my ankle, screw up my knee, screw up my hips. And then each one of those things, I also found the way to do it while still doing low postures without hurting those things. So
Yeah, I
like
mean, you could
it's a
also
process.
you probably could have gone a little bit easier on yourself. But yeah, I
I
mean, I think that's
think it was also stupid.
I
So
don't
I
know if you have
had
to
to learn
hurt
each of
your
those things,
yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily that you have to hurt yourself like to cause an injury, but there's
No,
that
those weren't injuries. They were
it's
just
yeah,
pain.
it's like the way I describe it is it's like there's a massage that makes you go ah, and then there's someone really getting in there and pushing on something that's really tight and you go ah, right? Like that second one it hurts, but it's not somebody ripping your arm out of the socket, right?
No, it's
It's
not an
not
injury. It's
yeah,
just
it's not the pain of
pain.
damage, it's the pain of things being moved that haven't moved.
Becoming more flexible can be painful,
Yeah,
basically.
exactly.
So, I mean, I'm looking at this article. Lowe's doing what he's called the dragon, palm change in Gao style, and you squat down and then you pivot 180 while you
Oh
stay
yeah, yeah, right,
squatted, and
right,
it's
right.
like At first, I found that really hard and I tweaked myself a few different ways figuring it out. When I finally did it enough and got it in my system, and now it feels good when I do it. So like that's a process in Bagua that other martial arts may or may not put you through. I mean, I guess other martial arts, when I learned
Well, I
Shaolin,
mean,
I got so my legs got so tired I couldn't climb up the steps. So I had to like drag myself up with my arms. Like my
it's
legs
not
stopped working.
I mean, it's not that different than say like doing a really low
Right.
turn and dragging the
Right.
machine or
Oh,
the
fuck. It's
kick at the
exactly the
end of
same.
the second section of the Wu style where you spin around on your heels.
Hmm.
Basically, it's that thing where one foot's on the toe and one foot's on the flat, and
Yeah.
you spin, as you rotate, you switch it, right? So you're going from one flat to one sort of with the heel off the ground, and the lower you get, the more it starts to really pull. I mean, most people, it's how stretched out their feet and their Achilles tendons are. Because when you start getting down low with on your toe like that, it really stretches your ankles and your feet in a way that, again, most things just don't do that kind of motion. It's just not there. It's like, so Bagua kind of unique in that way. It puts you through the ringer in terms of all these crazy ass movements.
Yeah. So then he ends by saying it was taken from an older Taoist method. And
Mm,
I think, as we've talked about many times, some people are more on the mystical side, some people are less. Low in public and when he teaches is in the less. But everybody's got to admit, Dong Hai Chuan did learn it from the Taoists, out in the mountains. So every school has that in common. There is a little Taoism in there somewhere. All right, so carrying on with his discussion. In fighting, do Bagua people really try to run around their opponents? Luo De Xiu laughs.
that's
That
funny.
old story? Of course not. But Bagua does use lots of different circles. It's normal in fighting for people to circle each other, to try to get behind each other, to get a better angle. Circle walking practice is this, but you have to remember practicing and fighting are different.
Yeah.
You need to keep in mind both big circles and small circles. You can use movement to find a good angle and also attract the other person to follow your movement. It's better not to talk about a circle in general, but to talk about you and your opponent, your movement relationship. So that's rather than, yeah, the idea of, circling so much that the other person, what you get around behind them somehow. That's a legend that unfortunately persists.
Right. Well, that's the confusion, I think, between the Bagua martial applications versus Bagua circle walking development,
Right.
right? Like, you do the circle walking as a training, but that's not,
That's the
that's
difference
like
between
moving.
fighting and training.
It's like moving slow in Tai Chi, right? Like, the circle walking is the
Cool.
thing you're adding to your training that's making it, unique in a sense. Where, like, in Tai Chi, it's how soft can you be, right? And how deep can you sink and all this sort of thing, right? So that's, it's just kind of, that's its thing. But
Definitely. The big circles and the small circles, the angles, all those things are so important. But like he says, it's more about your relationship. Bagua is a 50-50 relationship. You poke, they defend, you attack. It's got a interactive, you don't just bulldoze the other person. In other words, there's a movement relationship.
it's a spatial interaction between you and another living thing, basically, right? The idea that, and that's where it's, again, the practice versus the reality, right? When you're circling around and you're doing palm changes, you get to decide what the circle is, right? You can say,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to do it this big, or I'm going to circle around this thing, or I'm going to go that way. But, if somebody's running around trying to hit you, you don't have that, it's different, it's changing. So, again, the principle of change is what you get from the circle walking, but that's not, again, you're not going to do Tai Chi fighting super slow. You're not going to do Bagua fighting on a circle.
So next he says, what is Bagua's fighting philosophy? Luo De Xiu says, in our school, it's simple. Use what you have that is strong to attack what is weak. Use the enemy's strength, use angles and distance to stay safe. If something doesn't work, then change. And then he says what we've been talking about a few times on the Patreon. He says, I like to talk about the basic relationships. If you come, I go. If you run away, I chase. If you stand there, I disturb you. And if you want to try and collect yourself, I destroy your situation and tempo. So yeah, like basically use your strength against the opponent's weakness. That's what everyone wants to do. I mean,
Sure.
that'd be great.
Well, again, this is where the principle and the application, right? First, you have to understand, like, what are you trying to do? And then you have to train like hell, in a lot of different weird situations until, you never can really fully, like, mimic what it's going to be like to be attacked by 8 people in an alleyway.
Right.
But you can do things where you can scare yourself a little bit and or have someone else scare you, and that will bring up some of the stuff. And the idea is that if you continuously bring up little bits and kind of shave away at some of that stuff, then when the real thing happens, your fear is less. Your you know desire to just freeze up and curl into a ball is less. You actually learn how to react to things and do something. I mean, that's where I say it a lot, but it's like the ability to do, right? The ability to get your mind to just say, okay,
Mm,
do something, right? To not have that moment of like, oh shit, right? Because essentially it doesn't matter. Like the piece in there that he said that I think is the most important. He said, if something doesn't work, do something else.
right.
Because really the most important thing is change.
Mm,
And then if that change didn't work, change again
right.
and keep changing so you're not just a predictable thing that's doing the same thing over
Yeah.
and over that can be, you know,
That's that
awful.
principle of change
Yeah.
that's the answer to every question, basically.
It's being a moving target essentially, right? Like,
Exactly. And then again, he talks about, if the opponent's standing there, you disturb them, you shake up their awareness. But if you want to collect yourself, and I get the sense he means like if you're gathering yourself up to punch, I'll destroy your situation and tempo. So you physically bump them and move them to knock off their ability. So halfway as they cock back, you're already bumping them off balance so that their punch goes awry, basically.
yeah, again, this is that, they move first, but I arrive first kind of
Right. You're back to that again.
mentality.
So he says, your school has 64 forms. Why do you have so many? Lowe replies, the 64 forms contain many techniques, more than you need to fight. Just one or two good techniques are good enough to fight. But which one or two? I'm big, my student is small. Should we use the same technique? No. But with the 64 forms, you can choose the technique for your body and for your character. The 64 forms can help you understand the techniques of other people. You can choose the technique you use, but you cannot choose the technique your opponent uses. If you know other techniques a little bit, it is easier to fight against them. And finally, practicing 64 forms trains the body to move well too. Up, down, left, right, inside, outside, forward, back are all covered. Plus, Chinese people like the number 64.
That's funny.
It's sort of a good luck number, so there's always that.
I
But yeah, I
mean,
mean, we covered that, right? Last time quite a bit. It's like, but I like the idea that it also exposes you to other people's types of attacks. Even if one of the 64 isn't the one you like,
right.
it does give, by the time you're done with it, you've been through the ringer. You've done everything you can do pretty much. So
It's
it's a
like
good
long
education,
forms
even
and
if you
short
don't
forms.
memorize them all, even if you don't learn them and keep them all.
Right.
Like just be going through them all helps you build into your brain. And so he says one or two is enough.
Well, that's where like long forms and short forms, right? Like
Yeah.
a short form will give you enough to fight with, right? The long form is about just kind of expanding your repertoire of technique and, like you said, kind of knowing what to do in more situations, right?
Yeah,
So
exposure. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like, and that's what I mean, really, that's what um, sparring with different people gives you, or
There's that. Yeah.
practicing with different
Yeah. The
schools.
64 will help you warm up for that, give you
Yeah.
some exposure before it's time to actually compete.
Well, this is one of those things that, all martial arts have as kind of a pitfall or whatever, is if you only train with people that do the same thing as you or very similar things to you, you only get to really experience those things, and then something that's very different from that will sort of freak you out, right?
Yeah. So the next question, what's the relationship between Baguazhang and the I Ching?
Mm.
So that's an interesting one because not every school is into the Bagua side of
Most,
things,
I would say, aren't.
right? He says, in our school, the relation is about the ideas and concepts. The I Ching goes from simple to complex and back to simple. It says if there's one thing, there must be its opposite too. If something is full, it must begin to empty. If something is empty, it must begin to fill. Everything changes, and the change has patterns you can use. In fighting, this means if you can hit high, you can also hit low. If a technique works one way, then you can also use it the opposite way. There is the idea of change. If the opponent does not change, I hit him. If he changes, can I move to control how he changes? So I'll just finish by the rest of what he says. There's a few basic tips. First, Chinese like to think about the three main things: heaven, earth, and human being, and their interrelation.
This is that Jing Qi Shin.
Uh-huh. And the three treasures, yeah, of Baihua we spent a lot of time on last season. Then he says, second, when yin and yang combine together, what things come out? Third, think about mathematical recombination. Play with the variables you have and see what restructuring is possible. And finally, see in two different ways. How does one thing break down into many things, and how do many things unify into one? So we'll look at those one at a time. So heaven, earth, and human being, he mentions. That was a huge topic in Baihua's book, right? You learn how the way of heaven influences the way of earth and man, basically, was one of the big takeaways from that, right?
Yeah, and that's just that interaction. I mean, essentially, that's the interaction between you and gravity, right? And so
Mm,
the how do you structure your body so you're not being squished by gravity and you're not fighting it too much to the
mm,
you're tense, right? And once you do that, you create this sort of center thing. And basically he's kind of going through it because the next stage is you do the yin and yang piece. And
ah,
once you hit yin and yang, you could go five elements, but you could also go eight trigrams, and
right,
you could do some other, I'm sure there's other ways to go too, right? But this is that idea of most Taoist practices take one of those three paths, right? They either do,
as
yin
their
and yang,
structure, kind of, yeah,
yin and yang, five elements, eight trigrams. Like those were the three big like
their
um yeah,
cosmological, structural, foundational concepts, kind of.
right. And that's, I mean, my theory about why they have the names that they have in the modern age is because they all basically showed up, the modern versions at least, in Beijing around the same time in the late 1800s. And they wanted to distinguish what they were doing. And right. So the idea of like, well, I do, yin and yang fist. And one guy's like, well, you only got two. I got five element fist. And then one guy's
Right,
like, oh, yeah, I got eight trigram fist.
right.
And some other dude's like, well, I got 12 animals. And then some other guy's like, I got, look at 18 kicks. And, it just keeps going
Right.
until you're at like, I got 508 stabbing palms, and it's just like, it's an arms race kind of. So anyway,
So then and so like you're saying, he says to play with the variables and see what restructuring is possible. So you try to combine things every different way, every different kick and sweep and throw and punch. You try to analyze how they work together and find how they flow together. And that's a I Ching concept. It doesn't mean the I Ching is exactly going to explain that for you. If only, it's going
right.
to just give you that framework for figuring things out by recombining and
But that's, yeah.
separating.
And that's like where you take, like, say you take your palm strike, right? And you say, okay, well, what happens if I turn one way? What happens if I turn the other way?
Right.
What
Or if they
happens?
grab my wrist while I do it, or if they're
Yeah.
punching while I do it.
Or what happens if I'm on this leg versus that leg, or if I'm turning this way versus that way? And then all of a sudden that one palm strike becomes, a whole bunch of different techniques.
Right.
But the arm is still doing the same basic action, but you've just changed, what the relationship is to the rest of your body, and that gives you a quote unquote different application.
Right. Exactly. And then he ends with, how does one thing to break out into many, and how do many things unify into one? Break apart and unify. So that's that process of, again, same as his recombining idea, but slightly differently. Like every single thing can be broken up into multiple parts and then put back together as a unified concept. And Again, the 64 is a nice way to do that, but it's this again, circle is one way to do it, and straight line's another, and they complement each other. So
I
that's a
mean,
benefit of Gao style.
change is change, right? You can practice one change or you can practice many changes, but eventually you get comfortable with the change. And that's kind of, I think once you can do that, whether you go the long route or the short route or, the in between route, it's like you get there eventually. It's just what do you want to do along the way? And, this version is about doing martial arts.
So he says, why not 8, 9, or 12? 11 or 12? He says, Chinese people like the number 8 too. It comes from I Ching. You
Yeah,
can think of 3 dimensions. In each dimension, you can go in 2 directions. When you have 3 dimensions and 2 directions, that's 2 times 2 times 2 equals 8.
there you go.
So, yeah, people like the number 8. And that 3-dimensional side of it is definitely that I Ching concept again.
Yeah, that's the 8 trigrams is like, but in like Tai Chi and Xingyi, they use the 5 elements for 5 directions, right? So it's like,
Mm.
but it's the
Whereas
same.
he's trying to make it a 3D cube kind of thing of 2 by 2 by 2 in each direction.
So, change. But yeah, that's good. I like that.
All right, so we'll call it there and pick it up next time.
Okay, sounds good, man. Hey, folks, hope you enjoyed the episode. I'll be posting some images from the article on the Instagram and Facebook group. And if you want a bonus episode to go along with this episode, you can head over to our Patreon where we're doing a series on Jess's trip to China where he went up to Wudong Mountain. The most recent one is about seeing a lot of images and things related to Zhen Wu, who's one of the older Taoist images or figures that we've sort of been tracking over the years. So we get into a discussion about him as well as sort of Jess's, experience of actually going there. So check it out. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Take care of yourselves and be well.